to stay very still. But his mind was racing. Why would detection dogs circle the 10-year-old girl? They hadn't traveled internationally. They'd been through standard screening. Audrey's backpack held nothing but a water bottle, coloring books, and Mr. Buttons. There was no reason for this, except there was. The dogs formed a semicircle, handlers keeping tight control. One officer, a woman with short blonde hair and sharp eyes, stepped forward, her nameplate Red Brooks. Officer Helen Brooks, her 9, a German shepherd with intelligent brown eyes, held position at her side. The dog's name was stitched on his vest. Ranger. Helen's voice cut through the tension. Professional and firm. Sir, I need you to step back slowly. Keep your hands visible. There's been a mistake, Carter said, forcing his voice steady. We're just trying to catch a flight. Step back, sir. Helen's tone didn't waver. Behind her, another officer appeared older, maybe 50, with silver hair and the bearing of someone used to being obeyed. His badge identified him as Chief William Parker, head of airport security. Parker surveyed the scene with narrowed eyes, taking in the dogs, the crowd, the flashing blue lights. He lifted a radio to his mouth, spoke quietly. More personnel arrived. The perimeter expanded. Carter felt Audrey's small hand grip his shirt from behind. He glanced back. Her face had gone pale. Not fear, at least not entirely. Something else. Her other hand pressed against her throat, and Carter saw what everyone else had missed. A faint red rash blooming along her neck. Her lips looked slightly swollen. Her breathing had changed. Not loud, not dramatic, but faster, shallower. His medic training kicked in like muscle memory. He knew these signs. Hives, edema, respiratory compromise. Anaphylaxis, early stage, but progressing. And then Ranger did something that changed everything. The German shepherd broke formation. Helen's leash went slack as Ranger moved forward, not aggressively, but deliberately. He walked straight to Audrey, sat down beside her, and looked up not at the backpack, not at the luggage, but at her face. His tail didn't wag. His posture was formal, controlled. This was an alert, but it wasn't the alert the other officers expected. Carter recognized it immediately. He'd seen similar behavior in search and rescue dogs trained to detect medical conditions, blood sugar drops, seizures, cardiac events. Ranger wasn't signaling danger from Audrey. He was signaling danger to her. She's having an allergic reaction, Carter said sharply. Loud enough to carry. My daughter is anaphylactic. She needs medical attention right now. Chief Parker frowned. Skeptical. Sir, the detection alert came from this area. We need to secure. Your dog isn't alerting to explosives. Carter interrupted, pointing at Ranger. Look at his posture. He's doing a medical sit. He's trying to tell you she's in distress. Helen Brooks stared at her partner, then at Audrey. Understanding flickered across her face that she'd trained Ranger herself, knew every signal in his repertoire. The dog had cross-training in medical alerts for community outreach programs, diabetic detection mostly. But the principle was the same. Ranger was telling them to pay attention to the girl, not the bag. Parker's radio crackled. A voice reported elevated sensor readings near cargo processing, likely interference from recently offloaded freight containers with masking compounds. The security chief processed this information slowly, weighing protocol against instinct. He looked at Audrey again, saw the rash, saw her hand at her throat. Get the medical team, he said into his radio. Then to Carter, what does she need? Carter was already moving, dropping to his knees, pulling Audrey's backpack around. His hand shook, not from fear, but from the adrenaline dump. The sudden shift from helpless bystander to active responder. He found the EpiPen in the front pocket. Bright orange, unmistakable, auto-injector. Epinephrine 0.3 mg. He drilled this scenario 100 times. But now, under pressure with 14 dogs and dozens of eyes watching, his fingers fumbled the safety cap. He twisted it the wrong direction, swore under his breath. Let me help. Helen Brooks was beside him, her voice calm, her hands steady. She'd done emergency response training, knew the mechanics. She guided his grip, showed him the correct motion. Carter nodded, refocused. He pressed the injector against Audrey's outer thigh, right through her jeans, and held it for 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. feeling the click and hiss of the dose delivering. Audrey gasped eyes wide. The injection stung, but the epinephrine would work fast. Carter pulled the pen away, checked the window to confirm the medication had deployed. It had. He dropped the used injector carefully, aware of the needle still inside. Helen was already calling medical codes into her radio, staying beside them, one hand on Aryar's head. The dog remained sitting, watching Audrey with what looked almost like concern. The crowd had pulled back, giving them space. Someone was recording on a phone. Carter saw the light, the angle. He didn't care. Let them film. Let them see. Dr. Vivian Cole arrived less than 2 minutes later, moving fast with a medical kit and a portable oxygen unit. She was 38, sharp-eyed, with the efficient calm of someone who'd worked emergency medicine long enough to trust her instincts. She knelt beside Audrey, clipped a pulse oximeter on her finger, listened to her chest with a stethoscope. Respiratory rate elevated, oxygen saturation 92%. Tachycardia. Vivian's assessment was quick and clinical. She placed an oxygen mask over Audrey's face, adjusted the flow. You gave epinephrine 3 minutes ago. Carter said 0.3 mg good. Vivian drew up antihistamine and corticosteroid doses. Administered them via syringe. We need to monitor for biphasic reaction. I want her under observation for at least 4 hours. Audrey's breathing was already easing, the epinephrine opening her airways. Color was returning to her lips. She looked at Carter with confused eyes, still frightened but trusting. He squeezed her hand. You're okay, sweetheart. You're going to be okay. Ranger shifted, laying down beside Audrey now, close enough that she could feel his warmth. The dog's presence seemed to calm her more than any medication. Audrey reached out with her free hand, touched his fur. Ranger's tail thumped once against the floor. Permission granted, Chief Parker stood over them. Radio silent now, watching. Helen met his eyes. Ranger was right, she said quietly. He caught it before we did. Parker nodded slowly. He'd been wrong. He'd followed protocol, prioritized security over context, and nearly cost them critical minutes. He wouldn't make that mistake again. Clear the perimeter, he ordered. Medical emergency only. Get these people moving. Officers began dispersing the crowd, redirecting travelers to other gates. The immediate crisis had shifted. This wasn't a threat. This was a child who needed help. But the situation wasn't over. The sensor alert hadn't been random. Something in Terminal C had triggered the detection system. Something sophisticated enough to create interference that scattered 14 canine units across the concourse. While Dr. Vivian continued monitoring Audrey's vitals while Carter held his daughter's hand and whispered reassurances. Helen Brooks was already scanning the area with Ranger. The dog had completed his medical alert. Now he was back in detection mode, nose working, body tense, and he was pulling toward the luggage carousel 20 feet away. Helen followed, keeping the leash slack, letting Ranger lead. Chief Parker joined her, hand near his radio. They watched the dog move methodically, checking bags, ignoring most of them, until he stopped at a silver with priority tags. It was expensive, the kind business travelers used for laptops and documents. Unremarkable. Except Ranger sat again. This time the alert everyone expected. Helen radioed the code. Parker isolated the area. Whose bag is this? Parker called out. A man stepped forward. 40 years old, medium height, calm expression. He wore a charcoal suit and carried himself with the easy confidence of someone who traveled frequently. His name, according to his boarding pass, was Corbin Tate. That's mine, he said smoothly. Is there a problem? We need to inspect it. Corbin's expression didn't change. Of course, whatever you need. He produced keys, unlocked the valve. Parker opened it carefully, gloved hands moving through layers of packed contents. Clothes, toiletries, a laptop, and beneath, a false bottom that Parker found after 3 minutes of searching a sealed metal box wrapped in activated carbon cloth. Masking material used to suppress scent signatures. Parker's jaw tightened. He radioed for the bomb squad. But when they opened the container under controlled conditions, there were no explosives. Instead, they found dozens of microchips in anti-static packaging, stolen semiconductor technology worth millions, destined for black market buyers in countries under trade embargo. Corbin Tate wasn't a terrorist. He was a courier for industrial espionage. Security footage reviewed later showed Corbin bumping into Carter earlier near the kiosk. It looked accidental. It probably was, but the activated carbon box had leaked trace compounds into the terminal, interfering with the sensors, creating the false positive that brought 14 dogs to Audrey. If not for Rares' medical alert training, if not for the dog's ability to distinguish between explosive signatures and physiological distress, they would have missed Corbin entirely. They would have cleared the terminal. Let him board. Let him disappear. Instead, Corbin Tate was placed in restraints, read his rights, escorted to holding. The investigation would take months, but the seizure was clean. Parker allowed himself a moment of satisfaction. Then he turned back to the medical team, to the girl with the oxygen mask, to the father who'd kept his head when it mattered. Amanda Ruiz arrived 40 minutes later, breathless and furious. She'd been downtown in a meeting when Carter's emergency text came through Audrey and anaphylaxis, airport medical, stable, but monitoring. Amanda had run 3 red lights getting there. She burst into the medical clinic, saw her daughter surrounded by equipment, and her first instinct was rage. Rage at Carter for failing again, for putting their child in danger, for being careless with the one thing that mattered most. What happened? Her voice was sharp, accusing. How did she get exposed? Carter stood exhausted. Trace contact. She touched a package at the kiosk. I didn't see it happen. Of course you didn't see it. Amanda's voice rose. You never see it, Carter. You're so busy trying to prove you can do this alone that you miss the details, the important things. Dr. Vivian Cole stepped between them, professional and firm. Miss Ruiz, your daughter received appropriate medical care within minutes of symptom onset. Her father administered epinephrine correctly. His training likely saved her life. He shouldn't have had to use it at all. Allergies don't work that way. Vivian's tone left no room for argument. Cross-contamination can happen anywhere, anytime. The important thing is response. And Mr. Hayes responded perfectly. Officer Helen Brooks joined them. Ranger at her side. For what it's worth, your ex-husband recognized my partner's medical alert before any of us did. He kept calm under pressure when most people would have panicked. If we'd wasted time treating this as a security situation instead of a medical emergency, the outcome could have been very different. Amanda looked at Helen, then at Carter, then at Audrey. Her daughter was breathing easier now. Color returning. Her daughter was breathing easier now. Color returning. Holding a teddy bear and petting a police dog like this was all some strange adventure. Amanda felt her anger deflate, replaced by something more complicated. Guilt, maybe, or recognition. She'd spent so long fighting Carter, building a case against him, that she'd stopped seeing him clearly. She'd forgotten that before he was her ex-husband before the divorce, before the custody battle, he'd been the person who stayed awake all night when Audrey had CRO. The person who learned to braid hair from YouTube videos. The person who showed up. I'm sorry, Amanda said quietly. I thought I know what you thought, Carter said. And you're not wrong to worry. But I am trying, Amanda. I'm doing my best. She nodded, blinking back tears. She wouldn't let fall. Can we talk later? I mean about the custody arrangement, about making this work better for her. Yeah, Carter said, we can talk. Chief Parker watched the family from a distance, observing the shift in dynamics. He'd made decisions today based on policy, on procedure, on the assumption that security threats mattered more than human context. He'd been wrong, or not wrong. Exactly, but incomplete. Sometimes the threat wasn't what you expected. Sometimes the hero didn't look like policy predicted. Sometimes a dog could be smarter than an entire security apparatus. He approached Carter, extended a hand. Mr. Hayes, I owe you an apology and a thank you. Your daughter helped us catch someone we've been tracking for months. Carter shook his hand, confused. How? Parker explained about the microchips, the masking compounds. He explained how the sensor interference had created the alert, how Rangers cross-training had separated medical distress from security concerns. If your daughter hadn't been here, Parker said, if this situation hadn't unfolded exactly as it did, Corbin Tate would be halfway to Vancouver by now. So, Thank you, and I'm sorry for how we handled the initial response. Carter absorbed this, still processing. Audrey had become part of a federal investigation without even knowing it. The whole thing felt surreal. But the surreal wasn't over because 30 minutes later, as Dr. Vivian was preparing discharge instructions, Audrey's breathing changed again. Subtle at first, just a slight wheeze, a faster rhythm, then more pronounced. Her oxygen saturation dropped. Hives reappeared on her arms. Vivian's expression tightened. Biphasic reaction, she said sharply. We're transporting to the hospital now. Biphasic anaphylaxis. The secondary wave that could occur hours after the initial exposure. Even with treatment, it happened in roughly 20% of cases, unpredictable and dangerous. The medical team moved fast, loading Audrey onto a gurney, re-establishing oxygen. An ambulance was already en route, but it was stuck in airport traffic. Parker made a decision. Take the service corridors, he said. I'll clear the route. He handed Carter a security badge. Follow me. They moved through back hallways and freight passages, places the public never saw. Concrete floors, industrial lighting, the skeleton of the airport's operation. Carter carried Audrey himself, the gurney impractical in tight spaces. She felt so light in his arms. Too light. He talked to her constantly, keeping her awake, keeping her calm. Remember the superhero story? The one about the girl who could breathe underwater. Well, you're even braver than her because you're fighting something nobody can see. You're fighting invisible monsters, and you're winning. Just keep breathing, sweetheart. In and out. Count with me. 1, 2, 3. Audrey counted, her voice thin but steady. Ranger trotted alongside them, Helen keeping pace. The dogs seemed to understand the urgency, staying close without getting underfoot. When they finally reached the ambulance bay, EMTs were ready. They took over smoothly, transferred Audrey to their equipment, established in 4-line for fluids and medication. Carter climbed in beside her. Amanda started to follow, then hesitated. Go, Carter said. We both should be there. They rode together in the back of the ambulance, not speaking, just holding their daughter's hands. Ranger watched them leave, ears forward until the doors closed and the vehicle pulled away with lights flashing. At the hospital, Audrey stabilized quickly. The second dose of epinephrine worked. The steroids kicked in. By evening, she was sitting up eating popsicles, asking if she could watch cartoons. Dr. Vivian stopped by to check on her, satisfied with the progress. You'll need to stay overnight for observation, she told Carter and Amanda. But she's out of danger. She was very lucky today. Lucky. Carter supposed that was one word for it. He preferred prepared or resilient. But he'd take lucky. Amanda left to get coffee. And in the quiet room, with beeping monitors and sanitized air, Carter finally let himself exhale. He thought about the morning, about how fast everything had changed. One moment they were checking boarding passes. The next they were surrounded by police dogs and flashing lights and life or death decisions. He thought about Ranger, the way the dog had sat so calmly, so deliberately. Medical alert, not a threat, a warning, a gift. Helen Brooks visited that evening, still in uniform. Ranger accompanied her. Officially off duty now, but still working in the way. Good dogs always did watchful, attentive. Reading the room, Audrey's face lit up when she saw him. Can he come closer? She asked. Helen smiled. He liked that. She brought Ranger to the bedside. The dog placed his chin on the mattress, gentle and careful. Audrey stroked his ears, buried her fingers in his fur. Thank you for sitting, she whispered to him. You're a good boy. The best boy. Rare's tail wagged slowly. A metronome of contentment. Helen explained more about the training, about how Ranger had been certified in both detection and medical alert work. He can smell changes in body chemistry. She said, when your body started reacting, he knew before anyone could see it. That's what the sit means. Look at this person. Something's wrong. Pay attention. It's his way of telling us to focus on the human, not just the threat. Carter listened, fascinated. I've seen dogs do cardiac alerts, seizure prediction, but never in a security context. We started the program 2 years ago, Helen said. Community outreach. We thought if our kinds could help beyond law enforcement, why not train them? Ranger's one of our best. He saved 3 lives so far. Well, for now. She looked at Audrey with genuine warmth. You're part of his record. Audrey grinned, proud of this strange honor. Can I be friends with him? I think you already are. The media picked up the story by nightfall. Airport security footage showed the 14-dog perimeter, the medical emergency, the courier arrest. Headlines wrote themselves. K9 saves child, catches criminal, father administers life-saving treatment. Under pressure, Ranger, the hero dog, the videos went viral, spreading across news networks and social platforms before Carter even knew it was happening. His phone exploded with notifications. Friends, relatives, former colleagues reaching out. Even Amanda's lawyer called, awkwardly congratulating Carter on his handling of the crisis. Chief Parker held a press conference the next day. He stood at a podium with Helen and Ranger beside him, cameras flashing. Yesterday, our team responded to what appeared to be a security threat. Parker said, thanks to the training and instincts of Officer Brooks and her canine partner, Ranger, we were able to distinguish between a medical emergency and criminal activity. Because of their quick action and the decisive response of the child's father, Audrey Hayes received the care she needed. And because of the circumstances that brought 14 of our detection teams together, we were able to apprehend a suspect in an ongoing federal investigation. This case demonstrates the value of multidisciplinary training and the importance of looking at every situation with both security and humanitarian perspectives. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. I also want to acknowledge that our initial response could have been better. We followed protocol, but protocol isn't always enough. Sometimes you need to read the room, read the dog, read the people. Mr. Hayes saw what we missed. He trusted his training and his instincts. Officer Brooks trusted her partner. And because everyone was willing to adapt, we had the best possible outcome. I'm grateful and I'm proud of this team. The press asked questions about the microchips, about Corbin Tate, about Ranger's training. Helen answered patiently, giving credit to the broader K9 program, to her colleagues, to the years of development that made moments like this possible. When someone asked if Ranger understood he was a hero, Helen smiled. He understands he did his job, she said, and that's all he's ever wanted. 3 weeks later, Carter and Amanda met with their lawyers and agreed to revise the custody arrangement. Not because of the press coverage, not because of public opinion, but because the crisis had forced them to see each other clearly. Amanda admitted she'd been looking for problems, building cases, preparing for battle. Carter admitted he'd been defensive, isolated, afraid to ask for help. They were both tired of fighting. They both wanted what was best for Audrey. So, they agreed to co-parenting, shared schedules, coordinated medical plans, unified rules about allergen exposure. It wasn't perfect. There were still hard conversations, logistical tangles, moments of frustration, but it was better, healthier. Audrey seemed lighter, less caught in the middle. She started smiling more. 1 month after the incident, Chief Parker announced a new initiative, allergy awareness and emergency response education for airport staff and travelers. The program would include demonstrations by K9 teams, instruction on recognizing anaphylaxis symptoms, and distribution of formational materials about cross-contamination risks. Carter volunteered as a consultant, helping design the curriculum. Helen and Ranger agreed to lead the demonstrations. The program launched on a Saturday morning in Terminal C, the same location where everything had happened. A small stage was set up near the security checkpoint. Families gathered, curious about the police dogs and the medical equipment on display. Carter stood to the side, watching Helen work the crowd with Ranger at her side. She was a natural teacher, clear and engaging, explaining how canines could be trained to detect more than just contraband or explosives. Our dogs can be partners in health and safety, she said. They can alert us to dangers we can't see or smell ourselves. They can save lives. Ranger demonstrated the medical alert sites, responding to a volunteer who held a vial of synthetic histamine markers. The crowd applauded. Children asked questions. Parents took notes. Carter saw understanding spread through the audience. This wasn't abstract. This could happen to anyone. Audrey took the stage next, remarkably poised for a 10-year-old. She held up an EpiPen, showed the crowd how to remove the safety cap, where to inject, how long to hold it. She talked about reading labels, about knowing your allergens, about teaching friends and teachers what to do in an emergency. "My dad saved my life," she said simply. But Ranger told everyone to pay attention. He sat down so that I could stand up. The line had become her favorite. She'd written it on a card for Ranger, decorated with drawings of paw prints and heart. Up to the end of the presentation, Audrey walked over to Ranger and presented him with a gift. A miniature version of Mr. Buttons, small enough to attach to his vest. It had the same worn fur, the same missing eye. Helen helped clip it in place. Ranger tolerated the decoration with patient dignity, then licked Audrey's hand. The crowd applauded again, louder this time, moved by the gesture. Carter stood beside Amanda, watching their daughter shine. Amanda leaned close. "She's remarkable," she said quietly. Carter nodded. "She gets that from you," Amanda added. He glanced at her, surprised. She smiled, a real smile, the kind he hadn't seen in years. "You did good, Carter. That day and every day since. I should have said that sooner." "Thanks," he said. "That means a lot." They stood together, not as husband and wife, not even as friends yet, but as parents who'd survived something terrifying and come out stronger. Audrey waved at them from the stage, beaming. Carter waved back. Amanda did, too. Ranger sat between them all, his tiny teddy bear bouncing slightly as his tail wagged. The program grew. Other airports adopted similar training. More canine units received medical alert certification. News outlets featured Ranger, turning him into a minor celebrity. Though Helen was careful to keep his life as normal as possible. He was still a working dog, still had a job to do. But now that job included education, outreach, showing people that safety came in many forms. Carter returned to his regular life, fixing air conditioning units, picking up Audrey from school, navigating the rhythms of single parenthood. But something had shifted. He felt less isolated, less like he was failing all the time. The crisis had proven he could handle pressure. More than that, it had proven he wasn't alone. There were people, Helen, Dr. Vivian, even Chief Parker, who saw his competence, who respected his instincts. That validation mattered more than he'd expected. Audrey thrived. She became an ambassador for allergy awareness, speaking at school assemblies and community events. She carried Mr. Herrodding Buttons everywhere. But now he had a friend, a photo of Ranger tucked in her backpack, a reminder that help could come from unexpected places. She still had moments of fear, still worried about reactions in hospitals and that feeling of not being able to breathe. But she was braver now, stronger. She knew she could survive. On quiet evenings, Carter would sit with her and talk about that day. Not the scary parts, those were fading, already becoming story instead of trauma, but the good parts. The moment Ranger sat down, the way Officer Brooks stayed calm, the teamwork between strangers who came together for one purpose. People can be pretty amazing when they need to be, Carter told her, especially when they pay attention. Like you, Audrey said, like all of us. 6 months after the incident, Carter received a letter from Chief Parker. It was handwritten, formal, and brief. It thanked him for his service to the airport community, for his expertise in developing the allergy awareness program, and for his example of grace under pressure. Enclosed was a certificate naming him an honorary member of the airport safety team. Carter framed it, hung it in his living room where Audrey could see it. She was proud of her dad. He was proud of her. Helen visited occasionally, bringing Ranger along for what she called friendship patrols. Audrey loved these visits, playing with the dog, practicing commands, learning about his work. Carter and Helen became friends, too, bonding over shared experience and mutual respect. She told him stories about other calls, other emergencies, the strange and beautiful moments that came from working with animals who understood the world differently than humans did. Ranger doesn't care about policy, she said once. He cares about people, about helping. That's his whole world. I learn from him every day. Carter understood. He learned, too, from his daughter, from Helen, from a German shepherd who knew when to break formation and sit beside a child in distress. He learned that competence wasn't about being perfect. It was about staying calm, trusting your training, and paying attention to what mattered. He learned that families came in many forms: blood relatives, ex-spouses, canine partners, doctors who showed up when called. He learned that one moment of courage, one decision made under pressure, could change everything. The story didn't end with headlines or awards. It ended with normally school mornings, dinner routines, weekend trips to visit Audrey's grandmother. But the normally felt different now. Richer. Carter no longer felt like he was just surviving. He was living, building, connecting. And on hard days when doubt crept in, when Amanda's words from the early custody battles echoed in his mind, when he worried he wasn't enough, Carter would look at that framed certificate. He'd think about 14 dogs and flashing blue lights, and the sound of his daughter's breath returning to normal. He'd think about a dog who sat when everyone else was standing, who saw the danger no one else could see. Sometimes the greatest acts of compassion came from the quietest places. Sometimes salvation looked like a German shepherd with gentle eyes and a medical alert sit. Sometimes the hero of the story was the one who stayed calm when the world was chaos, who trusted himself enough to act. Carter Hayes had been that person. And on a morning in Terminal C, surrounded by strangers and uncertainty and fear, he'd learned something essential. That being a father, being a protector, being enough, it didn't mean being perfect. It meant showing up, staying present, doing the next right thing. And in the end, that was always enough. The terminal hummed with its usual energy, now travelers rushing, announcements echoing, the smell of coffee and jet fuel. But Carter walked through it differently. He noticed more. The people, the details, the small acts of care that happened constantly in public spaces. A mother helping a child tie shoes. A stranger returning a dropped wallet. An airport worker guiding someone lost. These tiny moments of humanity, easy to miss, easy to dismiss, but essential. The fabric that held everything together. Audrey walked beside him, Mr. Buttons tucked under one arm, her medical alert tag blinking softly in the terminal light. She wasn't afraid of airports anymore. She understood that danger could happen anywhere, but so could help. So could kindness. So could the moment when someone or some dog chose to pay attention. "Dad," she said as they passed the spot where it had all happened. "Yeah, sweetheart. Do you think Ranger remembers me?" Carter smiled. "I think he does." "Good." Audrey said, "I remember him, too. I always will." They walked on, father and daughter, heading toward whatever came next. Behind them, Terminal C continued its endless rhythm. Flights departing, flights arriving. Thousands of stories intersecting for brief moments before diverging again. Most of those stories would be forgotten, but some of the ones that mattered, the ones that changed people, those would linger. This was one of them. The story of a single dad, a daughter with a life-threatening allergy, 14 police dogs, and one perfect moment when compassion wore fur and saved a life. The story of a German shepherd who knew that sometimes the most important thing wasn't catching the thread, it was protecting the person. The story of how one sat down so that everyone else could.